In a classroom at the academy, Professor Edward is teaching the students the basics of using magical spells. After finishing his lecture, he calls upon our hero, Will, who is busy writing notes next to his summoned beast, Chi-Chi. When Will notices Edward calling him, he quickly stands up and responds. Edward says to him, "I've been calling you for a while to come to the board." Will says to himself in frustration, "Here we go again." Within seconds, Will is standing next to Edward, facing some components. Edward asks him to use a fire spell. Will hesitantly uses the fire spell on the components, but nothing happens. After a moment of silence, most of the students laugh at Will, who can't even use the simplest spell. Edward silences them, getting angry at Will, looking at him with contempt and saying, "I don't know how a useless person like you joined the best magic academy." At that moment, one of the students present uses a fire spell and we learn his name is Cyan. Edward reprimands him for acting without permission. Cyan apologizes but says sarcastically that Will doesn't seem to be in his best form today, so he just wanted to help. Edward responds by using a new spell to turn the fire into ice and explains to the students that magic is everything in their world, and a person without talent like Will can't use any spells and has no right to be among them. At the end of the lecture, we see Will thanking God that the lecture, or rather the bullying party against him, ended peacefully. However, Cyan appears with two of his classmates and mocks him again, saying, "I heard you spend all your time in the dungeon." They ask him contemptuously how he can spend time in such a humiliating way. At that moment, a girl from the class named Colette appears and tells them that Will is a very kind person who tries harder than anyone else. She asks them not to mock him again. Cyan laughs sarcastically and implies that Will's kindness and effort will never make him an outstanding mage. He tells Will to listen to Professor Edward and leave the academy altogether, then leave. When Cyan leaves, Colette comforts Will, asking him not to pay attention to Cyan and Professor Edward's words as they clearly look down on him. Will smiles and thanks her, but lets her know he isn't bothered by their words and that he's lucky a beautiful girl like her is interested in. Colette is shocked and embarrassed by his words and asks him to stop talking like that so no one misunderstands. He replies that he didn't say anything wrong, and that he was taught from a young age to compliment girls. On the other hand, Colette tries to calm herself after Will surprised her with his words, and the situation between them seems complicated. When Colette notices Will staring intently at the sky, she asks him what he's thinking about. He replies that he was thinking about how beautiful the sky is today. She agrees, especially since they can see the legendary constellation of the Magi. We then go to the past and learn that long ago the world was under the control of a very powerful being. Clouds were everywhere, and people lived in darkness, not knowing what the sun looked like, until 5 people from the desert appeared, killed the beast, defeated them, and restored peace and light to the world. They were given the title of mythical mages, and since then that title has been given to the strongest mages in the world. Back to the present, we see Colette looking at the top of the tower and asking Will if he thinks the mythical mage is looking at them now. He replies that she is definitely by the window right now, sleeping peacefully. Will gets lost in his memories, and we see him as a young boy sitting with a girl holding a book. Her name is Elvie, and she is telling him about the stars, the sun, the moon, and the unparalleled beauty of the sun. They learn they could see all these things if they could become mythical mages and reach the top of the magic tower. He promised her they would become mythical mages and reach the top of the tower together. Although it was just a childhood promise, Elvie was very talented and became the youngest mythical mage in history, fulfilling those promises. On the other hand, our hero Will failed and couldn't use magic at all, which is why he is suffering to keep his promise to Elvie. Will snaps out of his memories to find himself in Professor Graham's office, who is scolding his brother for entering the 7th level of the dungeon alone. They realize his recklessness could be the cause of his death one day. Will apologizes profusely and asks if he will receive a reward for hunting monsters. After a wait, Graham informs Will that he will receive 2 points for hunting the evil guardian, and asks if he is still determined to become a mythical mage. Will confirms he is determined to achieve his dream. Graham replies that before he can reach the magic tower, he needs to graduate from the academy, which requires a large number of reward points. Since he can't use magic, he will lose many points and graduating from the academy will be nearly impossible. Will replies that he knows this, which is why he hunts monsters to compensate for the points he lost. Graham says he doesn't want to discourage him, but the idea of becoming a mage based on practical points alone is impossible. When Graham notices the despair on Will's face, he changes the subject and asks him to focus on graduating first, then on achieving his dream. Since he couldn't collect any points in the past exams, he must collect many points before the week ends, or he will be expelled. Will frantically flips through his book to find a monster he can hunt that will give him many points. Graham then mentions, as if talking to himself, that there is a monster on the 6th level that could get him the points he needs. Will hugs him spontaneously and thanks him for his constant help. So far, things are going well for Will, as he has secured the points he needs, but he didn't know that Cyan was outside the office and overheard the conversation between him and Graham. Cyan decides to hunt the monster before Will can get to it, to prevent him from getting the points and thus get him expelled from the academy. At night, we see Will walking through the dungeon happily after securing his future. He looks at Chi-Chi, who seems displeased with the situation, and reassures her that he can handle the monsters since he has faced them before and knows all their movements, unlike previous times. He asks her to use her sense of smell to guide him to the monsters. On the other side, we see Cyan and his classmates walking in the dungeon. Cyan tells them they don't need a failure like Will in the academy because he ruins their reputation, which is why he will kill the monster Will wants to hunt, get him expelled, and be rid of him. One of them says it's dangerous for them to be alone on the 6th level of the dungeon, but Cyan looks at him angrily and says, "Are you underestimating my power?" He continues on his way, annoyed that his classmates doubt his strength because of Will's failures. He tells them to look for the monsters, but suddenly he is thrown sideways and slammed into the wall as his body completely breaks. When he discovers the cause and sees the monster that appeared, fear and terror take over him and his classmates. At the same time, Will was eating calmly before continuing his search for the monster, but he hears screams and runs quickly to find the source. Within seconds, he arrives at the location and sees Cyan on the ground, dying of terror facing the massive monster. Will freezes in shock when his eyes fall on the monster and asks himself in disbelief, what brought that monster here? We learn that the monster is called the Evil Guardian, and its places in the lower levels where the monsters are stronger. Cyan continues his desperate attacks on the monster, but all his fire shots have no effect. The monster continues advancing towards him calmly. At that time, Will decides he must save Cyan, but he stops for a moment and asks himself if there is any reason to risk his life to save Cyan. All the time Cyan mocked and bullied him passed before his eyes, and he thinks that if he leaves him, he will be rid of Cyan, his bullying, easily. But then he remembers Elvie's smile when she gave him his glasses and realizes that he is the bravest and kindest person she ever met. At that moment, Will overcomes his hesitation and decides to save Cyan, not because he is brave but to be worthy of Elvie's good opinion of him, as he is, after all, just an ordinary person. At that time, the monster was about to crush him completely, but Will intervened at the last moment and successfully blocked the attack. Meanwhile, at the academy, we see Edward rushing into Graham's office. Graham asks him what's wrong. Edward informs him that Cyan and his friends entered the dungeon without permission and asks for his help in searching for them. Graham asks which level they are on. Edward replies that they are on the 6th level. Graham calmly says there is no need to worry because Will is there. He uses his magic on the crystal beside him to show what is happening in the dungeon from Chi-Chi's perspective. We return to Will, who is locked in a fierce struggle with the monster. He exchanges powerful blows, and despite the monster's devastating attacks, Will can block and dodge them skillfully thanks to his great speed. In the midst of the epic battle, Will successfully dodges a fatal attack from the monster and manages to wound its arm, increasing the monster's fury and ferocity. It attacks Will with even greater force, but Will blocks its attack with great skill and moves away from the monster. The monster plunges its sword into the ground and hurls a massive rock at Will. Will shatters the rock and runs at high speed toward the monster, using the dust from the shattered rock to surprise the monster. He attacks with greater force, plunging his sword into its shoulder. Cyan and Edward, who are watching, can't believe that the person before them is the same Will they mocked all this time. Graham explains to Edward that Will has supernatural strength. No mage possesses such a solid body that can withstand the strongest attacks, in addition to a combat talent that allows him to analyze any attack after seeing it just once. Although Will has no magical abilities, his combat skills make him the only warrior in the world of desert they live in. As he finishes speaking, we see Will deflecting the monster's sword with incredible lightness that surpasses its strength. After flipping in the air, he cuts off the arm holding the sword. The monster roars in pain after its arm is severed. Will calmly approaches its massive sword, pulls it out, and points it at the monster, which roars fiercely and angrily, firing a magical beam at Will. Will uses the sword to block the attack and, with one devastating strike, cuts the monster in half, sending its head flying. He emerges from the dust and checks on Cyan, who is biting his lips until they bleed from remorse. On the other side, we see Edward, whose reaction isn't much different from Cyan's. He leaves Graham's office angrily, unconvinced by what he saw, and insists that Will has no place in the academy. The next day, we see Will in Graham's office, being scolded for ignoring his advice and acting recklessly again. But Will forgets all that when Graham gives him the points that will save him from expulsion. We go back in time 5 years and see Will at 10 years old, at the beginning of his enrollment in the academy, feeling despair because all the students mock him for having no magic and for joining the academy because of his relationship with the mythical mage Elvie. After a while, we find Will and Graham standing in the office of the academy director named Caldran. Caldran gives young Will a small dagger, then attacks him with spells from all directions. but will destroy all the spells with great skill. Amid Graham's shock, who falls to the ground in disbelief at what is happening, Cauldron laughs and informs Graham that she will allow Will to continue his studies at the academy and won't expel him. Graham asks her if she is sure about her decision since Will has no magic and everyone in the academy opposes his presence. Cauldron explains to him that Will's presence will be very interesting because it's the first time she has seen a warrior like him who wants to become a mage. Will, crying, asks her if he can become a mage like Elvie if he continues his studies at the academy. Cauldron replies that he is hardworking, has strong determination, and there is a possibility he can achieve his dream. After they leave the office, Cauldron says to herself excitedly, "Let's see what awaits Will in his dream." We return to the present and see Will sitting in Graham's lecture, where he explains to the students that there are two ways to reach the top of the magic tower and obtain the title of mage. The first is to invent a new type of magic, and the second is to collect 7,200 points during their studies at the academy. Since inventing a new type of magic is very difficult and only a few students have achieved it, most students try to collect points. But all the students before him have very few points, to the extent that they are on the verge of being expelled from the academy altogether. Graham begins a long lecture explaining how to get out of their predicament. After the lecture, we see Will walking tiredly with Colette beside him comforting him. She asks how he attends these lectures even though he has collected all the points he can from theoretical exams. He replies that he didn't collect any points from the magical exams, so he is forced to attend these lectures. Besides, Graham is a very kind person who helps him all the time, unlike the other teachers who don't care about him at all. Colette says he's right, especially Professor Edward, who tries to expel him from the academy in any way possible. As they walk, they encounter a group of students standing around, and one of Cyan's friends tells them that Cyan succeeded in defeating the evil guardian in the dungeon alone. Admiration is clearly visible on the faces of the standing students who look at Cyan in awe, but Cyan seems annoyed because he knows it's all a lie. The moment he spots the talentless Will in front of him, he stands up angrily, runs towards him, grabs him by the neck, and says, "How can a talentless, despicable person like you?" Before he can finish, Colette intervenes and stops him, asking him angrily what he wants from Will and what he gains from bothering him all the time. At that moment, Cyan lets go of Will and walks away from the place, angry and feeling defeated by Will, who is supposed to be beneath him. Colette asks Will in surprise if there is a reason for Cyan's strange behavior. Will replies that he doesn't know anything about it. We go to the director's office, Cauldron, and see Edward asking her to expel Will from the academy. Cauldron asks him the reason for his request, especially since Will is in his final year at the academy, and it's only a matter of time before he leaves anyway. Edward explains that there is no need for a person like Will to be in the academy, especially since he is a warrior, not a maid. At that point, Cauldron pulls out Will's file and makes Edward understand that Will's grades are excellent, aside from his inability to use magic. At his current level, he could become a magic toolmaker or a researcher. In her opinion, there is no need to get rid of a talented person like him. Edward gets angry at her words because Will's only goal is to become a mage, and he doesn't think at all about becoming a researcher or anything else. Cauldron replies that as long as he is not convinced, she will allow him to test Will himself, especially since he has learned his true ability, and she will not object to the decision to expel Will if he fails the test. But if he succeeds, she doesn't want him to think about this matter again. Edward asks her if she is sure because he won't go easy on Will like Graham does. She replies that she has no problem with that and will let him determine the type of test as he wishes. As soon as Edward leaves the office, she says to herself that Edward is the right person to test Will, since he is the one who knows the value of the title of mage the most. We go to Will, who is thanking Colette for helping him open his magical lock. Colette looks at him and says, "You haven't changed at all since you entered the academy until now." Will confirms her words and explains that the academy won't allow him to carry his sword with him if he goes back to the dorm, so he can't do anything because of his classmates. After he gathers his books, we find him sitting in the library, reading his book with great concentration and writing notes about the battle that took place between the dwarves and mages in the past due to the mages' mistreatment of the dwarves. Colette asks him in amazement as he has studied the first part before. He explains to her that he is interested in the dwarves' perspective, nothing more. She replies that his way of writing is much better than hers, and there is no one who puts in as much effort as he does. He explains that he can't afford to lose any points or he won't be able to graduate from the academy, especially since he can't use magic. In addition, he understands the dwarves' feelings, especially their determination and refusal to surrender in the face of the desert, which is stronger than them. While they are talking, Colette notices a white hair on Will's head and asks him to remove it, but he refuses. She insists on removing the white hair herself. Their conversation is interrupted by Edward's voice, who asks them what they are doing here. Colette replies awkwardly that they were studying. Edward then asks Will to come with him alone to the spell. When they arrive at the hall, Edward tells Will that he has decided to give him an additional lesson since he fails the magic test every time. Will asks if the lesson is for him alone. Edward confirms that and says the first thing he will do is determine whether he deserves his time or not. He strikes a magical spell next to him, informing him that all he needs to do is hit him with a single strike. If he succeeds, he will get 5 points, and if he loses, his fate will be expulsion from the academy. He has no choice if he refuses this test. He tells him that people who can't use magic have no place in their academy. As he finishes speaking, he launches a magical spell right under Will's feet. On the other side, we see Graham, who has just arrived at Cauldron's office, asking why she summoned. She replies that she just wanted to inform him of the developments. With a wave of her hand, a window appears showing the test Will is undergoing. Graham asks her in surprise what this means. Cauldron explains to Graham that Edward is testing Will, just as she allowed Will to continue his studies at the academy based on his suggestion, so she had to listen to Edward's suggestion, who insists on expelling. Therefore, she asked Edward to test whether Will deserves to try to become a mage or not. Graham says this is a very harsh decision for Will because despite Edward's failure to become a mage, he is one of the few mages who reached the top of the magic tower. At that moment, we see Will dodging Edward's attacks, looking tired and exhausted. He says to himself that Edward is using the weakest magical spells, but the resulting speed is insane. He moves quickly from his place, runs towards Edward, jumps into the air, and delivers a powerful kick. However, Edward has already created a barrier around himself to block Will's attack. He tells him no one but you would be foolish enough to try to kick a magical barrier. He repels Will after his attack fails, but Will is surprised by Edward's attack from behind, which knocks him to the ground. Will gets up from the ground weakly, unable to believe Edward's power, who uses magic without chanting spells. He tries to use the weakest spell for deadly weapons. At that moment, Chi-Chi comes out of the place and Edward makes Will understand that he will only use 2 spells. The black flames he attacks with and the barrier spell he defends with. Before he moves, Edward begins chanting a spell and a large number of magical circles appear above him. Will realizes he is duplicating the same spell and attacking him with a barrage of strikes simultaneously. Will runs at full speed to escape Edward's attacks, but Edward's spells follow him everywhere, causing direct hits that throw him to the ground. He tries to get up again after experiencing Edward's immense power and says that if he had his sword, the situation would be completely different for him. We go to Colette, who is putting her book in her locker and wondering what Will's condition is now. After a moment of thought, she says that Edward is surely torturing Will since they are alone. Her thoughts are interrupted by Chi-Chi's entrance, who is bleeding and standing in front of Will's locker. Chi-Chi makes Colette understand that she wants her to open the locker. Colette realizes that Will is in danger. We return to Will, who is on the ground, and Edward approaches him and says arrogantly that if he can't defeat him, then even thinking about becoming a mage is impossible. He tells him, "Do you know how many mages faced thousands of rebellious dwarves in the past?" He puts his foot on Will's head, who is trying to get up, and says to him arrogantly, "A single mage was enough to eliminate thousands of dwarves. A warrior like you can never be on the level of a mage because that's the nature of the world we live in." He looks at Will with contempt and adds, "Someone like you who can't use magic should just disappear." But Will replies with determination, "Even if I can't use magic, I will never give up. I will become a mage and stand at the top of the tower with Elvie." At that moment, Colette arrives and throws the sword to Will. He draws it and stands before Edward with resolve. Edward launches his attack on Will, but Will destroys the spell with his sword. Edward surrounds them with black flames and prepares to attack Will with a barrage of spells. Will feels fear because he knows Edward's power well, but he overcomes that fear and realizes that the only way to defeat Edward is to destroy the barrier protecting him. Within moments, spells rain down on Will from everywhere, but he dodges the first group of attacks, which destroy part of the... With great speed, he moves towards Edward, saying, despite the dwarves' defeat, one of them managed to reach the mage and wound him, and as a result, the dwarves achieved their goal. As he finishes speaking, Will uses the smoke form from Edward's attacks, jumps into the air, surprises him, and launches a powerful attack that destroys the barrier, leaving Edward with a wound on his face. Edward leaves the place angrily, and they realize that he passed the test and got 5 points. We see the director and Graham expressing their admiration for Will's strength and skills that enabled him to defeat Edward despite the great difference in power between them. We see Will walking in the city streets distributing newspapers, looking happy. He greets one of the residents and gives him his newspaper. While walking, he stumbles and falls, and the newspapers he was carrying, his attention is drawn to a news article in the newspaper. Elvie has invented a new magic. But more important than this news is that there is a request from Elvi in the newspaper. We move to the city outskirts and see Will quickly packing his belongings and calling out to his roommate, whose name is Rust, asking him to prepare the magical tools he uses. Rust asks him calmly what's wrong and why the Rust. Will replies happily that Elvi has submitted a request that she needs a specific tool, and he must move quickly to get the tool she needs. When Rust asks him about the lectures he has at the academy, he replies that they are all supplementary lectures, so he will spend his time in the dungeon. He grabs him excitedly by the shoulder and explains that Elvi needs a monster gem called the Ice Walker. And fortunately, this monster is on the 4th level of the dungeon, and its gem is used in many magical components, so he needs one of his magical tools. Rust smiles and gives him one of the magical tools in front of him, informing him that it's a modified version of the tools he took before. Will takes the magical tool happily and prepares to leave, but Rust stops him and asks him to take care of himself, giving him a pie to eat. After a while, we see him standing on the 4th level of the dungeon, very excited to begin his search for the Ice Walker. He remembers the words of the mythical mage Marcy, who was one of the mythical mages who defeated the invaders. She recommended that mages explore the dungeon, as it is the origin of everything around them, and turn the unknown into knowledge and power that helps them. As he finishes his thoughts, he feels proud for being the first to reach the place and obtain the Ice Walker's gem before everyone else. But he is shocked to discover that the place is full of mages hunting the Ice Walkers to fulfill Elvi's request. He notices Sion, who is filled with anger, destroying any monster that comes his way, with his friends behind him praising him as usual. Sion remembers the incident that happened last time in the dungeon and the humiliation he felt when Will saved him, and he literally explodes with anger, his magical energy spreading throughout the place. Will decides it's better to stay away from Sion because every time he sees him, he gets into a fight with him for no reason. On the way, he spots a group of monsters attacking a girl on the ground. He quickly puts on his glasses, draws his sword, and skillfully kills the monster. When the girl opens her eyes, she is surprised that the monsters are dead and Will is standing in front of her. Will sheathes his sword, reassures her, and introduces himself. The girl thanks him for saving her and introduces herself. Her name is Irzi. They walk together for a while. After a while, Irzi says to Will in surprise, "So you're the famous researcher, the first person to enter the academy without being able to use magic." Will remains silent for a few seconds, then says to her worriedly, "What do you think? Do you despise me like everyone else, especially after knowing I'm talentless and can't use magic?" Irisi replies in surprise, saying she has no reason to insult the person who saved her life. She smiles at him and explains that his use of magic or lack thereof is not important to her, and she is only interested in intelligent people. When Will hears her response, he feels confident himself, and they continue talking. He asks her why she is in the dungeon. She replies that she came to obtain the Ice Walker's gem and help the mages protect the world. Will thinks to himself that her words are not an exaggeration because they don't know the true shape of the sky, and the sky they see is just a barrier created by the mythical mages to protect the world from the invasion. According to the legend, once this barrier disappears, a great catastrophe will befall the world, and darkness will cover the entire land. That's why all the students are trying their best to fulfill the mages' requests, as it is their only way to help protect the world. He snaps out of his thoughts at the sound of Irisi, who tells him he might not believe her but she met Elvi before. Irisi begins talking with admiration about her meeting with Elvi, her beauty, and her readiness to sacrifice her life for her, which is why she is in the dungeon alone. Despite all this, she hasn't found a single Ice Walker yet. She complains that she is late and the mages have hunted all the Ice Walkers in the area, but she stops talking when she notices that Will isn't listening to her at all and is examining the ground. She says to him in surprise, "What are you doing?" Will replies that the Ice Walkers always leave an icy trace when they move, and usually this trace is about a millimeter or less, but the trace he sees is very large compared to the normal size, meaning there is a very large Ice Walker nearby. And this monster is likely hiding somewhere they can't find. Irisi asks him in disbelief how he knows all this information since he can't use magic. Will replies that he knows magic is amazing, but he also knows that magic doesn't do everything, especially in dungeons. Although he has no magic, he has intelligence and wisdom, in addition to the experience he gained from his battles in the dungeon, which allows him to turn the unknown into knowledge. As he finishes speaking, he puts on his glasses and a huge monster attacks them from the ceiling. The moment the monster appears, Will grabs Irisi and moves away quickly to avoid the attack. Terror is clearly visible on Irisi's face as she sees the huge monster standing and looking at her with great ferocity. We learn that this monster is called the Ice Rex, the evolved form of the Ice Walker. The monster strikes the ground with its legs, sending icy shards flying everywhere, and fires an icy beam. Will pushes Irisi back quickly and sets her down on the ground. Irisi tries to stop Will from facing the monsters not affected by physical attacks, and the only way to defeat it is with magic. Since Will has no magic, he can't defeat it. In addition, the Ice Rex kills dwarves easily because it freezes anyone who approaches it. But Will tells her calmly that there is no problem because in fact he has faced this monster before and hunted a large number of them. As he finishes speaking, he rushes towards the monster at high speed. The monster fires an icy beam at him, but Will jumps into the air, dodging the attack. Before Will lands, the monster takes the opportunity and attacks him while he is in the air. However, Will deflects the beam with great skill. As soon as he lands, he takes out the magical tool he got from Rust and throws it at the monster. In less than a second, the tool wraps around the monster's entire body. Will says the Ice Rex's weakness is fire and explosion. As he finishes speaking, the monster tries to attack him, but Will activates the magical tool, and huge explosions occur, covering the monster in flames and turning it into a pile of icy debris. Will retrieves the magical tool, saying he didn't expect anything less from Trust's magical tools. Astonishment is clearly visible in Irisee's eyes, who didn't imagine this performance from Will. In a fraction of a second, her features change to seriousness, and she says to herself that the rumors she heard about will have no truth to them. She wonders what to put in her report. Her thoughts are interrupted by Will's voice calling her. He informs her that the huge gem he is holding will be enough for both of them, so he leaves it to her nature. She smiles at him. After a while, we see Irisee walking in the magic tower, taking off the glasses she was wearing and letting her hair down. She says that Will has no magic, but he is intelligent, has combat experience, and adapts to his surroundings no matter what. Although these qualities won't help him as a mage, they make him a very talented fighter. As she finishes speaking, she knocks on the door in front of her and enters the large hall where 4 of the mages are: Wiseman, Eli Nor, Zio, and Elvie. As soon as she enters the hall, she apologizes for interrupting. Wiseman says they were in a boring meeting discussing the safety of the barrier protecting the world, nothing more. Zio says angrily that the invaders are ready and waiting for the moment the barrier disappears to attack them again, and they don't even know how to gather people strong enough to face them. Eli Nor adds that they need talented individuals to face the invaders, so they can't allow the legend to come true now at least. When they ask Irisee about her report, she replies that during her observation of the students, she found a person who might be useful to them named Will. Although this person has no magic, she recommends him to be the new member of the Magic Tower. Without hesitation, Wiseman and Eli Nor reject Irisee's suggestion when they learn that Will has no magic. Eli Nor says she doesn't want to deal with lowly creatures beneath them. But Zio says he is interested in him and has no problem using any useful person, even if he is from the dwarves. Eli Nor replies angrily that she doesn't know why someone as savage as him is with. At that moment, Wiseman informs them that there is no need for disagreement because the magic tournament will start soon, and they can decide after seeing the results. If Will is as strong as Irisee said, he should be able to win the magic tournament and reach the tower. But if he can't win, he won't be of any use to them. So they all agree to this suggestion and the meeting ends with each of them returning to their place. Irisee stops in front of Elvie and informs her that Will has shown interest, just as she told her. Elvie takes the gem that Will delivered and says with a smile that she prefers to wait for him until he reaches her. We learned earlier that the way to graduate from the academy and join the Magic Tower is for the student to collect 12,000 points. We see the students gathered in the academy for the practical exam. Sion stands facing a huge goblin that attacks him. With one spell, he turns the goblin into a pile of ash and eliminates it. At the same time, we see Colette using her magic to destroy the goblin with a group of rocks. We learn that Sion has collected 9,889 points and Colette has 7,340 points. On the other side, we see our hero, Will, facing the goblin while holding his magical staff as if it were a sword, but the goblin defeats him with one strike. The students get angry at Will, telling him that it's not enough that he can't use magic, but he can't even scratch this goblin. One of them laughs and says mockingly that no one can do what Will does. We learn that Will has collected 5,405 points. Anyway, forget all the numbers you don't understand the meaning of. Liana uses her lightning magic to form a group of arrows and destroys the goblin with them. We learn that she has collected 1,011,100 points. Injin uses his magic and releases a devastating tornado that eliminates the goblin in seconds. We learn that he has 1075 points. At the same time, we see a large number of students facing the goblins, but they are surprised by icy winds that appear suddenly and freeze all the goblins in the exam area. The person who created these winds is Julius, who has collected 1048 points. Admiration appears on the students' faces who express their admiration for the strength of Julius, Liana, and Engine, saying they expected this amazing performance from the strongest students in the academy. We see frustration on our brother Will's face because his performance was very, very bad, and he couldn't get any points in this exam. In addition, these points determine the student's ranking in the academy, and with the points he collected, he won't be able to graduate from the academy, especially since this is his final year. At that moment, Julius passes by Will, looks at him with contempt and says, "Get out of my face, you wretch. Will apologizes to him and moves away from the place. Julius continues on his way and his friends praise him, saying they are sure he will join the Magic Tower since he is the best student in the entire academy. After a while, we see Will sitting with Colette, complaining that he won't be able to join the Magic Tower if he remains as he is. She explains that he must join the Magic Tournament to prove himself and join the Magic Tower, since he can't collect many points in the little time he has left at the academy. Will notices that all the students around them are busy talking about the Magic Tournament that happens every 2 years and consists of different activities. It is considered the most important event in the academy because students compete to prove themselves and get a chance to join the Magic Tower. Colette continues her speech, saying that this year's Magic Tournament is different because, in addition to the strong mages from the Magic Tower, the 4 mage founders will be present to watch the tournament. They are the Flame Emperor Wise Man, the Lightning Ruler Zio, the Ice Princess Elvi, and finally the Fairy Mage Eli Nor. There is a very high probability that they will choose one of the participants to join the Magic Tower and be under their personal supervision. This is a golden opportunity for him to join the Magic Tower without having to collect all the required points. He must prepare himself to deliver an amazing performance in this tournament. In addition, the Magic Tower observers will be present to choose the distinguished student. At that moment, Irisie passes by them quietly. Will replies to Colette that the presence of observers is just rumors, and it's impossible for the observers to be interested in a talentless person like him, so he will just help with the preparations for the tournament. Colette tells him sadly that this is the best opportunity to prove his true ability to everyone. Will smiles and tells her that if he joins the tournament, it will turn from a magical tournament to a sports tournament. He thinks about the last time he participated in the Magic Tournament when he got last place, and since then, everyone in the academy started mocking. The bell ringing interrupts him, and Will prepares to go to class, but Colette stops him and asks him happily if he is free after school to go with her to the library. But he replies with a smile that he is not free because he has some work at Gina's restaurant after school. At night we see Will working in the restaurant, which is full of dwarves gather dinner and spend a pleasant time after a long day of work. The restaurant owner, Gina, hands him the order to serve to the customers. He takes the food and serves it to Duane, who thanks him and says he is tired because he distributes newspapers during the day, then goes to the academy and works at the restaurant at night. Duane tells him that he has to do this to pay for his study expenses since he can't get any scholarships because he has no magic. Duane suggests that he participate in the Magic Tournament. Maybe he will win and get a free scholarship. Will replies that this is impossible and he is not participating anyway. At that moment, Gina shouts at Will and asks him to stop talking nonsense and focus on work like Rust. Will looks at Rust, who is working happily and thanking him for his help. Rust tells him there is no need to thank him because he wanted to try working without using magic. In addition, he loves helping him. At that time, Gina calls Will and asks him to try to convince one of his friends to work with her because she needs workers at the restaurant. Duane suggests to her that she hire part-time workers to save money. In the end, we see Will and Rust washing dishes. Rust suggests to Will that he ask Professor Graham to find him a new job because the salary he gets at the restaurant is very low. Will explains that he doesn't want to trouble Graham, in addition to loving the restaurant and the dwarves there because they treat him kindly. At that moment, Julius and 2 of his friends enter the place and Julius says contemptuously, "This disgusting place." His friend apologizes because this is the only restaurant open now. The atmosphere in the restaurant becomes tense with Julius and his friend's entrance, and a state of tension spreads in the place. The moment Julius notices Will's presence, he mocks him and tells his friends, laughing, that a useless person like Will has no more suitable place than being with these lowly dwarves. At that moment, Duane stands up angrily and says to Julius, "What do you mean by that?" But Julius looks at him contemptuously and says, "Who gave you the right to speak, you wretch?" He continues his speech that dwarves are just freeloaders with no use, lower than ordinary humans, and wonders how they dared to look at him in that way after humans allowed them to live in their world. As he finishes speaking, he sits on the chair, puts his feet on the table, and demands that they bring him food immediately. We learn that the dwarves fled their world after being attacked by the invaders, and as a result, they were forced to live in the human world. But humans despise them because they can't use magic, and if any of them touches one of the mages, it will be his end. The racism the dwarves suffer from is the best example of this world where magic represents everything. When the food is placed in front of Julius and his friends, they begin mocking the food and the dwarves in general. Julius says he can't stand the smell of the dwarves, which is worse than the smell of pigs to him, and he and his friends laugh. At that moment, Will leaves what he is holding, approaches Julius and his friends' table, and asks them to apologize for what they said. He tells them that this restaurant is the best in the city, and the presence of the dwarves is proof of their hard work, and they don't deserve all this mockery. Julius replies to him mockingly, and asks if he is sympathizing with them because they can't use magic like him. He puts his foot on Will like this and says there is nothing stopping him from saying his opinion about the dwarves. He throws the food on Will's clothes. Julius's friends laugh at Will and mockingly tell him to get out of there for his own good, but Will grabs the two of them and in the blink of an eye, they are slammed to the ground and lose consciousness. He says that humans are more ignorant and barbaric compared to the dwarves. The shock on Julius's face turns into a smile and he says to Will arrogantly that he has been waiting for this moment for a long time. As he finishes speaking, he takes out his wand and an icy wave spreads throughout the place, especially under Julius's feet, who says to Will that he will regret the day he was born. With a movement of his wand, he creates a group of icy thorns that fly towards Will. Will manages to destroy the thorns moments before they hit him, but Julius's attacks don't stop, and the thorns gather around Will from everywhere. Julius directs his wand at Will's chest, who says to him defiantly that he won't change his opinion. Julius says to him angrily that he won't hesitate to freeze him in this dirty place. He challenges Will to join the magic tournament so he can crush him in front of everyone. At that time, Will throws the ice around his hand, grabs Julius's wand, and tells him he accepts his challenge. Julius says arrogantly that when he wins, he will erase his existence from the academy completely. Will replies with a challenge that when he wins, he will make him apologize to Duena and the rest of the dwarves. We see Will sitting in the waiting room, looking serious and preparing to participate in the competition. On the other side, we see Director Caldron delivering a speech quoted from the Mage Mercedes's words to the students participating in the magic tournament, encouraging them to improve and strengthen their skills and show the world their talents. At the end of the tournament, they might directly help protect the world. At the end of her speech, she announces the start of the magic tournament. With the starting signal, a group of students riding dragons launch into a race around the place at great speed. Admiration appears on the spectators' faces, especially the students who expect Liana to win the race since she is currently in first place. At the same time, we see a group of explorers from the Magic Tower, specifically the Flame Emperor named Wise Man, carefully following the students to choose the distinguished individual. We return to Caldron, who tells Irisi, standing next to her, that the explorers from everywhere have started their work and spread among the crowds to monitor the students. Irisi replies that this event attracts mages from everywhere, not just the Magic Tower. As she finishes speaking, she puts on her glasses and prepares to leave the place, as Caldron asks her in surprise, "Are you leaving in such a hurry, Irisi?" Irisi replies that she has work to do in her capacity as an observer from the Magic Tower, in addition to wanting to cheer for a specific contestant. We go to Cyan, whose friends are cheering for him and wishing him luck in the crown race he is participating in. In a scene, Colette asks him shyly to join their team in the crown race. He swallows and realizes he couldn't refuse her request, especially since he is the only one who can help her. He says to himself that by helping her, Colette has finally realized that Will is of no use, and it's better for her to include him in her team. When he reaches the waiting room, he is shocked to find Will and Colette standing together. He asks her the reason for Will's presence with them. She explains that the conditions for participating in the crown race require the team members' total points to be at least 21,000, and the only way for Will to participate is if they include Cyan in their team. Cyan looks at Cyan and apologizes for deceiving him in this way. At that time, Cyan gets angry because he doesn't want to participate with a useless person like Will and asks him why he is participating in the competition in the first place. He has no magic. Their conversation is interrupted by the appearance of Julius, who looks at with arrogance. Colette explains to Cyan that Will and Julius had a fight and decided to end their conflict in the crown race. Cyan's anger towards Will increases because he ignored him completely, especially after wounding his pride and saving him in the dungeon. On the other side, we see the commentator named Mike, greeting the audience and involving them in the most important event in the academy moment by moment. He informs them that the person who will join him in commenting on the great events is a famous professor at the academy, and merely mentioning his name causes nightmares for the students. He asks them to welcome the Black Snake, Edward. Edward interrupts his voice saying, "You should write your will and prepare your coffin when you come to the lecture." Mike continues, and the members of the Jinn Alliance use their magic to change the terrain of the arena. The place transforms into different terrain formations represented by volcanic areas, swamps, lakes, rocky deserts, tropical forests, and so on. Unlike the others, the contestants will start outside the arena, then make their way through the different terrains to reach the crown located in the center of the arena. The first team to reach the crown will be the winning team, of course. The changes that occurred to the terrain won't be the only obstacle facing the contestants. There is also a variety of traps carefully planted in different places in the arena. The contestants can choose direct paths to reach the crown, and there is nothing preventing them from attacking other teams and hindering them because this race is a fierce battle for survival. Edward adds that the most appropriate use of the three-team skills is the best means of success, especially since this competition focuses on collaboration and teamwork skills, and the explorers are focusing heavily on the participants. Anger is clearly visible on Edward's face when Mike interrupts him, saying that the most exciting thing about the crown race is the fierce competition between the best mages in the academy, and the two teams most likely to win are Team 12 led by Ingen and Team 9 led by Julius. But the real surprise is Team 6, which has the least chance of winning and consists of Cyan, Colette, and Will. With Will's picture appearing on the screen, the students begin mocking him, wondering why he is participating in the competition. At the same time, Graham stands in front of the teams participating in the competition and asks them to prepare, but he is surprised by Will's presence among the participants, so he asks him in surprise about his presence here despite his warning to him against joining the magic tournament. Will apologizes to him and says with determination that he will participate and win the magic tournament, even if he is mocked by all the participants. Within moments, Mike announces the start of the Crown Race Challenge, and the contestants jump from everywhere towards the arena. Julius's team reaches a group of metal cubes. One of them asks about the reason for the strange stones, and before he finishes his words, all the cubes glow and turn into golems, blocking their path. Mike says that the first obstacle facing the contestants is the massive golem wall. Can the contestants penetrate it? He interrupts his speech when he notices Will running at high speed towards the golem. He asks what Will wants to do, and again, the students mock Will, who is going to commit suicide because it's impossible for him to defeat the golems, especially since he couldn't even scratch them in the practical exam. On the other side, we see Will calling Colette, and within seconds, Colette begins her first spell, forming a magical gauntlet on Will's hand. As soon as she finishes the spell, Will jumps high into the air and attacks the first golem he encounters with all his might, destroying it with one strike. He shatters every golem in his path. All the spectators are astonished, and silence falls over the frozen spectators in shock. None of them could have imagined what Will did. At that time, Graham says he expected this to happen, which is why he didn't want Will to participate. Colette says with a smile that there is no law preventing Will from using weapons made of magic to defeat the monsters. Will and his aim jump and quickly pass through the golem wall. Mike says in astonishment that the first team to pass the golem wall is the researcher Will's team. At that time, Cyan was standing watching Will penetrate the golem wall, and all he could think about was that he couldn't forgive himself after insulting Will, and that since Will saved him, he has been training with all his might to become stronger. But when he saw Will's performance in the competition, he discovered that he hasn't shown his true strength until now, and this represents a great insult to him. On the other side, Mike says in the fierce battle of the teams that the first team to succeed in advancing to the rocky area is Team 6. We see Will at the forefront of the team, running at full speed and dodging the traps that launch rocks in their direction. Colette runs behind him and warns him of the rocks heading towards them, so Will strikes the ground with the magical gauntlet he is wearing, creating a rocky barrier that blocks the rocks about to hit them. He continues on his way at the same speed. Colette uses all her magical spells to change the properties of the gauntlet he is wearing. He throws a group of daggers and destroys the magical traps attacking them. The team continues its advance at great speed, to the astonishment of the spectators, especially the students who say that Will's amazing performance is due to Colette's magic and her help to Edward comments that Will's performance wasn't just because of Colette's magic, but also the result of the long time he spent exploring the dungeon and the experience he gained from fighting monsters. With Will's team maintaining first place, we see the anxiety appearing on the other teams who are having difficulty overcoming the traps that increase the more they advance. Mike says that all the teams are in a hurry to reach the crown, and because of that, a large number of them fall into the traps. He asks if Will's team can maintain their lead and be the first to reach the arena. On the other side, we see Julius, who is clearly annoyed by the situation they are in after saving his team and freezing the plants that were attacking them. When he hears the loud sounds of the spectators, he gets annoyed and asks his teammate about the challenge promised. He replies that based on the information he has, Will's team is far ahead of the other teams, and if they continue like this, they will lose the competition, and Will win. But Julius smiles and says there is no problem because he will defeat Will himself. He leaves them and goes. We go to Will's team, who have reached the Enchanted Forest, the last station before reaching the stadium where the crown is. Since the forest is the final stage, it is full of traps and magical monsters spread everywhere. As soon as the team enters the forest, they are surprised by a large number of traps activating one after another at great speed. Within moments, Colette moves at lightning speed and changes the direction of the traps' attacks with her sword, making them destroy each other. Mike comments that all these deadly traps pose no threat to Will's team, who continue on their way with ease. We see clear anger on Edward's face, who ignores Mike's question about his opinion on Will and his team's performance. Will continues on his way, thinking that according to the competition rules, the closer they get to the stadium, the more likely they are to encounter other teams, and the forest will likely be the place where battles between teams occur. Therefore, they will precede all the teams to avoid useless fights and choose the most suitable place to set an ambush for Julius and his team. Will's thoughts are interrupted when he is surprised by something moving towards him at supernatural speed. He barely manages to dodge at the last moment, surprised. Colette runs quickly to check on him, but she freezes in place when she sees Julius standing in front of him, smiling. Julius's mind takes the form of an explosion as he tries to figure out how Julius managed to precede them and whether he is alone or his team is hiding nearby. His thoughts are interrupted by Julius's attack, who fires a barrage of icy thorns at him. He dodges the attack and decides there is no time for hesitation and that they must face Julius and defeat him now. But he stops when he hears Cyan's voice from behind him, who chants a spell with great anger. At that time, Colette asks Will with great concern to move away from his place quickly. But as soon as Cyan finishes chanting the spell, he launches a huge fire attack that destroys everything in its path and causes an explosion that shakes the place. After seconds, Will opens his eyes, asking himself what happened, but he is shocked when he sees the effect of Cyan's spell. Cyan approaches Will, who is on the ground after dodging the attack on his hair, and directs his words to Julius, asking him to move away because he is obstructing his path. When Colette expects that Cyan was defending Will with his attack, she gets upset and asks him what his goal is with his actions. Cyan replies calmly that he allowed them to be used until now without any objection, but from this moment on they will pay the price for using him. He looks at Will with contempt and says, "Fight me, you failure." But Will, who is surprised by Cyan's behavior, asks him what reason makes them fight each other now. They are on the same team. Cyan angrily hits a spell next to Will's leg, who dodges and stands up automatically. Cyan continues angrily that he doesn't need any reason to fight an irritating and annoying person like him. Colette intervenes, angry at Cyan because his actions are not in their interest at all. But she is surprised by an icy barrier forming in front of her, and Julius appears smiling triumphantly. It is clear now that he is enjoying what is happening. Colette wonders how Julius managed to emerge unscathed from Cyan's devastating attack. Within moments, Julius creates an icy arena that traps Will and Cyan. Colette tries to calm Cyan down and thinks there is no need to fight, especially since they are in the middle of the race. But Cyan responds to him with a barrage of explosions that explode around him, and with great anger, he demands that he take his sword and prepare to fight. Will confirms that he can't convince Cyan with words and that the only way is to fight him, so he grabs his sword and prepares for the confrontation. Who will win in this fight, and what will be the effect of the fight on the rest of the team? We see Cyan and Will standing facing each other, preparing to fight. Cyan starts the fight with a fire spell that launches 4 fireballs towards Will, who runs at high speed to dodge the balls that explode inches away from him. Hesitation appears on Will's face, who is still trying to avoid fighting Cyan. On the other side, we see Colette trying to stop the fight before things escalate and get out of control. But Julius attacks to prevent her from intervening. He activates a trap next to Colette and traps her in it. At that time, all the spectators are in a state of shock, not knowing the reason for the fight that suddenly broke out between the members of Team 6 after they were on their way to victory. Mike asks Edward about his opinion on the unexpected development of events they are witnessing. Edward replies with a wide smile that whatever the reason for the fight between the team members, it is, of course, prohibited because it will be the main reason for the loss. In addition to giving a bad impression to the explorer about the team members because they can't cooperate with each other. At that time, a strange event attracts the spectators' attention. Julius is present in more than one place at the same time. Astonishment is clearly visible on the spectators in the participating team, who are surprised by Julius's strange appearance in front of them. Julius takes advantage of the surprise element and eliminates a very large number of teams, except for Ingen's team, who managed to withstand Julius's attack. Ingen takes advantage of the fact that he didn't imagine Julius had the ability to eliminate almost all the teams at the same time. We return to the fight between Will and Cyan, and we see Will fleeing from Cyan's attacks that come at him from all directions like this. After a series of attacks, Cyan says a spell and creates a firehawk that attacks Will. Astonishment appears on Will's face because he didn't expect Cyan to have the ability to use an advanced spell and summon a fire guardian. With the firehawk rushing towards Will jumps into the air, skillfully dodging the attack, and cuts the hawk's wing with a strike from his sword. As soon as he touches the ground, he takes the opportunity and attacks Cyan to end this fight, but the hawk, which has recovered from its injury, attacks him again. At that time, Will realizes that he must destroy the firehawk's core to eliminate it completely. On Cyan's command, the hawk fires a fire breath like this towards Will, who jumps and dodges the attack at the last moment. Before Will can move, Cyan attacks with a devastating fire tornado. Will uses his magical gauntlet to block the attack. It becomes clear now that Will is in a hopeless position because he is caught between the Guardian's attacks which prevent him from approaching Sion at all. At the same time, Sion takes advantage of Will's preoccupation with the Guardian and attacks him with a powerful spell without any hesitation. Silence falls over all the spectators as they watch the fight between Will and Sion, especially Edward, who didn't expect Sion, who couldn't control his magic accurately, to improve his level so quickly that he uses advanced spells with great skill. We go to Sion, who says to Will angrily that his performance in the fight against the evil Guardian was much better than this, and demands that he use all his strength, or he will regret. Will plunges his sword into the ground and lets Sion know that he doesn't understand the reason for his insistence on facing him, because he doesn't understand any reason for them to fight. At that moment, Sion explodes with anger and says to Will, "Do you want me to understand that, after all the bullying and mockery I caused you, you don't hate me and don't want to take revenge on?" Will replies to him that he is of course upset by his actions and thought about taking revenge on him more than once, but currently he must defeat Julius in any way possible, so there is no need for them to fight now. Sion interrupts him, saying that despite hating him, he considers his determination, refusal to surrender, and his weakness and inability to use magic something amazing and annoying at the same time, which is why he exerted his effort to become stronger, especially since the moment Will saved him in the dungeon. But Will didn't give him any attention and acted naturally despite all that. Sion continues his speech that he has no interest in the reason that makes Will face Julius, and all that matters to him is that Will takes this fight seriously. With Will's realization that the reason for Shan's insistence on the fight is that he considers him a competitor, he decides that he must stop hesitating and face him with all his strength. Will draws his sword, puts on his glasses, and his eyes are full of challenge and readiness to face Sion. For the first magical spell, Will decides that he must use all his strength, or his attack will fail due to the presence of the Guardian. Therefore, he will wait for the moment Sion chants his spell and attack him. As soon as Sion finishes the spell, he orders the Guardian to attack Will. At the same time, he activates the spell that takes the form of a large number of magical circles raining fire shots from all directions on Will. Will says that he is in a very difficult position, and any mistake will be his end, but he still has a chance to win. At the end of his speech, he moves at great speed towards the Guardian, skillfully dodging the fire shots, jumps into the air with all his strength, attacks the Guardian, and destroys its core without any delay. Will rushes towards Sion at high speed, astonishing Sion, who didn't imagine that Will could dodge the attack and eliminate the Guardian at the same time. Sion chants a magical spell and directs his wand towards Will, who is only steps away preparing to attack him. Without any introduction, they are both surprised by a rocky barrier separating them and Colette's voice ordering them to stop this fight immediately. Sion can't stop himself, hits the barrier and falls to the ground. At the same time, Sion loses his wand and falls to the ground as well. When they see Colette, they ask her what happened to Julius. She replies that she attacked him, but he disappeared without a trace. She is angry that all that happened to them was due to their stupidity and insistence on challenging each other in the middle of the race. She turns her words to Will and asks him to precede them and go to the stadium to finish his fight with Julius. Sion objects because he hasn't finished his fight with Will yet and won't allow her to intervene. But she gets angry because he was the one who entered the fight between Will and Julius, in addition to it being Will's only chance to attract the Magic Tower's attention. Will thanks her, gives her his jacket, apologizes to Sion, and informs them that they will continue this fight another time, then leaves and walks away. In the stadium, we see Mike asking himself which team will be the first to reach the stadium. As he finishes his speech, Julius and his team appear with the spectators' cheers filling the place. Mike continues his speech that none of the competitors are currently present, so Julius's team will take the cup without any problems. He interrupts his speech when Will appears, looking at Julius with determination and challenging him to fight. In the Magic Tower, we see Elvie sleeping peacefully and her assistant named Saris calls her. When she remains asleep, her assistant hits her on the head and she wakes up. Her assistant asks her to behave in a manner befitting her status because she is always either sleeping or looking out the window. She gives her a set of papers and asks her to look at them. She informs her that this is information about the talented mages that the explorers have gathered and think deserve to join the Magic Tower. Among these mages, one person has attracted their attention greatly, and that is Julius, the center of attention in the Magic Tournament, and there is a possibility that he will be her successor. We return to the stadium, which is shaking from the cheers of the excited audience with Will's appearance and his challenge to Julius and his team. Julius looks at Will and says to him mockingly that he waited for him for a very long time and was afraid someone else would defeat him, because he wouldn't be happy if he won the race without humiliating Will in front of all the spectators. Will replies to him with determination that he won't lose before making him apologize to Duena and the rest of the dwarves. At that time, Julius interrupts and says to him, "Stop talking, you failure," Because you are just a small rat I will use to show my superiority to everyone. As he finishes speaking, a fog appears that obscures the entire place, completely blocking the view of Will. Guesses that Julius wants to use this fog to surprise him with a sudden attack like this, and says that the fog won't be an obstacle for him because he can sense magical energy and hear their footsteps, so he can determine their location. He is surprised by an attack coming from behind him like this, and he turns his face quickly and blocks the icy ball that was about to hit him. He says that he must move, or he will be easy prey for Julius. Despite the fog obscuring his vision, he can determine their location from the direction of the spells they are firing at him. Will continues moving in the fog, dodging the spells fired at him from the fog. When he dodges the third spell, he attacks Julius after knowing his location. But Julius remains standing in his place, smiling mockingly, and dodges the icy spell directed at him. Will blocks with his sword at the last moment, and question marks appear on his face. Julius asks him mockingly, "What are you doing? We haven't moved from our place a single step." Shock appears on everyone present, especially Will, who freezes in place when the fog disappears and he sees 5 copies of Julius in front of him. Will asks himself if Julius is using illusion magic to create copies of himself or not. But his thoughts are interrupted when Julius says mockingly and smiling, "I forgot to tell you that these copies explode." As he finishes speaking, the copy in front of Will explodes with a huge explosion like this, and Will disappears from his place. Astonishment appears on all the spectators, especially Edward and Graham, who confirm that Julius is using a spell from the 12 secret ice arts that Elvie invented. The spell Julius used is called the White Art, a spell that allows users to create icy copies identical to the original. Anger appears on Will's face, who asks Julius how he could use Elvie's spell. Julius laughs with arrogance and replies, "Talent, quite simple. He learned the White Art spell on his own, and although the spell's power is weak compared to the original spell, he has reached the level of a mage founder and will one day take Elvie's place herself." At that moment, Will explodes with anger, breaks the ice around him, and attacks Julius furiously. Julius fires an icy ball at him, which he blocks with his sword. Julius takes advantage of this opportunity and controls 3 copies to surround Will from 3 directions. Will is surprised by Julius's actions because his attacks have stopped, but the 3 copies explode and become an icy barrier trapping him. At that time, Will falls easily into Julius's trap. Julius approaches Will with a triumphant smile on his face and says contemptuously that there is nothing easier than hunting a stupid beast that doesn't think like this. As he finishes speaking, an icy mountain falls with great force on Will and buries him for moments. The spectators' cheers fill the place and they can't believe what has happened. Mike says that Julius won the fight without moving from his place, and this is a fundamental and important step for any mage. Edward says to himself that Julius's fame is not without reason. At that time, Julius looks at the spectators and directs his words to the explorer, saying proudly that his ice magic is invincible, especially after learning the White Art, and he will let everyone know that he will be Elvie's successor and become a mage founder. As he finishes his speech, admiration appears on the spectators, who say that no one can face Julius after the performance they are seeing. Irizi says that all of this is a theatrical show, and that Julius used Will to show his strength to the explorers. But if he thinks he defeated Will that easily, he is mistaken and will regret it. Will emerges when the icy mountain shatters, and he says that the ice helped him calm down a bit, especially since he gets angry quickly when someone talks about Elvie. He activates his wand and attacks Will with 3 icy shots. He says that he will make him regret the day he was born. With the explosion of the icy shots, a thick fog appears in the place. Julius smiles triumphantly, but his facial expression changes completely when Will appears from the heart of the fog and attacks Julius's team from behind. As he finishes his speech, he knocks out Julius's teammates with 1 strike before they can move from their place. With the fall of Julius's teammates on the ground, his copies are destroyed, to the astonishment of all the spectators. Will continues his speech and calmly approaches Julius. He says that he was controlling the copies with the help of his teammates, and he felt arrogant just because he could use one of Elvie's spells. But there is no comparison between him and a single strand of Elvie's hair. We return to the magic tower and see Elvie smiling and saying to her assistant that she doesn't need a successor, all she needs is someone to be by her side and help her. Back in the stadium, we see the commentators and spectators in a state of shock after Will eliminated Julius's team and destroyed all the copies alone. Will pulls his sword from the ground as he approaches Julius step by step and says to him calmly that his White Art skill is incomplete. The copies formed from the White Art need complete control from the user, unlike the magical guardian that acts automatically. Since he needed help from his teammates to control the copies, it means he hasn't mastered the White Art yet. As he finishes speaking, Julius creates a group of icy roses and throws them at Will, saying to him angrily, You are just a failure with no magic, so don't talk to me as if you are better than me. The roses touch the ground and become huge icy explosions covering the area he is standing in with thick fog. With the fog disappearing, Julius creates a group of icy copies and attacks Will with icy balls from all directions, saying to Will that he will turn him into a statue of ice. Will blocks the icy roses with his sword, but they begin to explode and spread fog everywhere again. When the fog clears, Will is shocked because icy spells surround him from all sides and begin to attack him. Will keeps moving quickly and blocks all of Julius's attacks with his sword. Nelias then tells Will that he is right, and the maximum number of copies he can control is 4. He says that a person without magic like him shouldn't be able to distinguish between the real one and the copies. While he is mocking Will, he is shocked that Will appeared in front of him and tried to attack him. He immediately creates an icy barrier to block Will's strike, but Will manages to split that barrier in half with one blow, to the point that a piece of ice hits Julius in the stomach, hurting him badly. He is shocked and asks how he was able to distinguish him from the other cop. Will tells him simply that the temperature of the copies is completely different from the real person. Julius asks him how someone like him knows all this information. Will tells him that he and Faye grew up together as children. He says that the two of them lived in an orphanage together, which is why he knows all her spells and magical arts very well. Will then looks at him with full confidence and says, I know all the weaknesses and strengths of Faye's magic. Julius, of course, is angry and doesn't want to hear anything else. He immediately attacks him with icy magic, but Will easily blocks his strike with his sword. Will tells him, I know you are the first person able to use Faye's magic, but I want to tell you that she invented this magic when she was only 2 years old. Julius falls to the ground, shocked by the words he is hearing. Will tells him there's no need for arrogance just because you managed to use a spell of Faye's that she used when she was 2 years old. When Julius remembers all the arrogance he felt when he thought he was close to Faye's level, it was just an illusion and not real. He starts laughing like an idiot and uses his magical art again, creating 8 copies of himself. He says to him, did you think 4 copies was the limit of my magic's power? We see a large number of icy spells flying in the air in front of Will, preparing to attack. But Will says to him, be careful, I used to challenge the Great Witch Faye with more than 8 copies. Will starts running at great speed and dodges all the attacks coming at him until he destroys one of the 8 copies. When Julius sees Will destroying the copies, he decides to run away and escape. He orders the copies to continue attacking him, but we see Will managing to destroy all the copies with ease until he finds Julius hiding behind the last copy and immediately destroys. Will then summons the magical glove and delivers a very strong punch to Julius, sending him flying. Of course, all the spectators are stunned. Even Mike says, I couldn't imagine that the failure Will without magic could defeat Julius so easily. After Will defeats Julius, he has only one thing left to do, which is to go get the crown. When he looks at the crown, he is shocked to find that the student Fangel has reached the crown, taken it, and put it on. He says, I'm very grateful that you fought Julius and wasted your time, letting me win the tournament and take the crown easily. And thus the race ends with Team 12. We return to the legendary Magic Tower and see Faye's assistant learning that the race is over because she hears the loud sound of the audience. We see Faye asking her assistant if there is any spell that turns back time. She tells her no, there is no such spell. Faye asks her if there is a spell that erases memories. She tells her there is a spell, but its use is forbidden. The assistant is surprised when she sees Faye crying and very embarrassed. Faye says to her, I wasn't bullying Will back then. I just wanted to play. We continue our story and see Will in his tavern with the dwarves, and they are celebrating him because he restored their dignity once again and managed to beat Julius in the tournament. They keep thanking him profusely. Even Teacher Gran asks the dwarves to take good care of Will and says that he is very kind and loves to help anyone. Then we see Will and the dwarf chief drinking until they are completely drunk. The dwarf chief asks him after winning the tournament, will you ascend to the magic tower? Cold says to him, no, of course it's impossible for him to ascend. Besides, we won the magic tournament because of that idiot Xian who was on our team. Then Eris comes and asks about Sean. Will tells her that they invited him, but he refused to. We then go to Julius, who is in the kitchen washing all the dishes, upset and angry. The owner of the tavern, Gina, keeps mocking him and says to him, I want all the dishes to be washed and shiny and I'll check if you've done. When he goes out of the kitchen, all the dwarves laugh at him. Then we see Gran talking to Cold and saying to her, do you think after all the students at the academy saw Will's great strength, how will act tomorrow? Cold says to him, on the contrary, all the students should start appreciating and respecting him instead of mocking him. She mocks a little. Then we see 2 academy students talking about how in 10 days the academy's final exam will begin, and they have to form teams to start exploring the strongest magic caves. They notice Will, so they decide to go to him and offer him to join their team after seeing his strength. Of course, Will and Cold are surprised because this is the first time someone has offered him to join their team. Suddenly, all the students arrive and start arguing with each other over who among them will be able to recruit Will for their team. Fangel, Xian, and Hannah arrive. Hannah keeps looking at him and says, "It's clear that everyone was impressed by Will after he showed his real strength in the magic tournament, which is why they are all fighting over him now." Cold intervenes and says to them, "Isn't this the Will you were all mocking? Now he's the star and you all want him on your team?" She then asks Will, "What do you think of what you're seeing now?" But she notices that Will is very happy that finally all the students at the academy have started to respect him after he was alone and had no friends at all. One of the students arrives and says to Cold, "You have no business with him," and approaches Will and says, "I am ready to offer you anything you need inside the magic cave and we will let you kill all the monsters you." Cold gets very angry and says to them, "Will is not free now because he is going out with me today." Then we go to Cold in her room and she is embarrassed that she said that in front of all the students. Her friend comes to her and says, "You need to fix yourself up so Will like you." Then we go to Will in his room and Eris says to him, "Since tomorrow is a holiday, have you decided to go to a magic cave and explore it?" Will says to him, "Unfortunately, I won't be free because I'm supposed to go out with Cold." He says that she told him that the end of year exam is approaching and that they need to prepare and buy all the magical tools for the exams. The next day, we indeed see Cold dressed nicely waiting for Will, and when Will arrives, he greets her and keeps complimenting the clothes she is wearing. At that moment, Cold is very embarrassed by his words and doesn't know how to respond. Suddenly, Eris arrives quickly and begins to greet Cold and says to her, "I am Will's close friend, and I live with him in the same room." Cold is surprised and doesn't know why he has come now. But Eris shocks her and says, "I'm here to go out with you today," and immediately grabs Will's hand and leaves Cold sitting alone like an outcast and sticks his tongue out at her as if to tease her, meaning that Will decided to go out with him and leave her alone. During the entire outing, we see Eris here taking care of Will and Cold is standing far away, feeling that she is unnecessary for the outing. She is very upset to the point that when he chooses his clothes and even the magical tools, Cold is standing far away and Eris is choosing everything himself. Then Will notices that Cold is very upset, so she immediately shouts at him and says, "What is your relationship with Eris exactly?" She says, "The relationship between you two is very suspicious and I suspect you." Will says to her, "What nonsense are you talking about? He's just a colleague of mine and lives with me in the same room." Rost arrives and sits between them to keep annoying Cold and keep her away from Will. Rost here says to Will, "If your sword needs maintenance, I want you to go fix it now to prepare for the end of year exam." As soon as Will leaves him and walks away, we see Rost goes to Cold and mocks her and says to her, "Will loves me more than you, and I also want to tell you that he lives with me in the same room, and we talk and joke with each other every day." They keep arguing with each other. Then we go to Will as he goes to maintain his sword, and we see student Hannah noticing him and asking to talk to him and take him on a small errand. She takes him to the secret room, and when Will enters, he is shocked to find Fangel, Julius, and Qian sitting there. Then Hannah says to Will, "I want to form a team of the 5 of us to invade the magic caves present in the end of year exams." Julius objects and says to her, "Do you want me to kill Will for you now or what?" Jane as usual gets angry and says to her, "Why did you bring this failure who can't use magic here now?" Of course. Will is also surprised and doesn't know why Hannah brought him here, especially with 2 people who hate him very much and don't respect him at all. Then gets angry and goes to hit him, but Fangel uses his illusion magic, and they are all terrified by the strength of his magic and remain standing in their place, unable to move. Fangel then says to them, "Let's hear Hannah out until the end." After that he decided. So she tells them, "Hannah, the year exam is approaching, and after we saw Will's great strength in the magic test, I decided to add him to our team because I know we will benefit from him greatly, and he also possesses skills that we 3 don't have." But Julius objects and says to her, "It's impossible for me to enter any magic cave with someone who doesn't have the ability to locate monsters in the first place." But Fangel says to them, "Your objection to Will is meaningless, especially since he was able to defeat both of you and prove that, with his sword, he can defeat the magic wands you have." They both get angry that Fangel agrees with Hannah's decision and decided to include him. Then we see Hannah say to Will, "My goal is not only to ascend to the magic tower but also to become a mage finder." She says, "I want to achieve very great achievements for my family, especially since no one in my family lives to a great age." She tells them each of you has an ambition they want to achieve, so let's cooperate with each other so that everyone can achieve their dream. She says to them, "Anyone who decides to join my team, I want them to place their coin in this cup." They all start placing their coins, agreeing for Will to join them. Then Will returns to Cold and Eris and they say to him, "Where were you?" Will immediately apologizes to them and says, "I decided to join Hannah's team for the end of year exam." We then see Gran explaining the rules of the end of year exam to them and saying, "We will open the caves from the 7th to the 10th floor, and these are the caves where you will take your exams." He tells them, "Seize the opportunity well and try to collect as many points as you can, because this is the only chance where you can collect more than 1,000 points. Teacher Adore starts scaring them and says, "In every exam we have casualties, and there are students among you who might die, so you must be very careful because the monsters are of a very high level and dangerous." We learn that Hannah added Cole to her team so that they would be 5 members. She says to her, "I didn't expect to include a weak girl like you." Colt says to her, "Well," we then see a person named Lou Gill, who is a liaison officer in the fire group. Speaking to Magic Finder Cariat, who is sitting on a chair, he tells them that they are holding a party for the practical applications for all the students this year. Cariat tells him there's no need to inform him of all the details. Although this is temporary, the performance of the magic wand is absolutely not acceptable. Lou Gill tells him that the lightning group is immersed in pleasures, the elves are arrogant, and the ice group is cold-handed. There is no one more suitable than him as the flame wand. Then Cariat asks if their light ruler has returned or not yet. Lou Gill regretfully informs him that he is still on his campaign. Cariat gets annoyed and says all this is happening when the barrier is on the verge of collapse. We find Professor Edward telling the students that the practical applications for all students have now begun, and they are all preparing and jumping. We see Will saying to himself that he will achieve results here, and this is his way to see Faria. Lena tells Lindor that she is relying on him, so Lindor uses magic and makes them fly. As they are descending, Will surprisingly crashes into the ground. Suddenly, a gigantic ant appears behind them, followed by an army of ants. Will says that mages are weak at close range. Their defenses can be broken. He grabs his sword and prepares, but suddenly finds Lindor stopping him and telling him not to tire himself out. He calls for Lena, who dashes at lightning speed and uses magic that shreds the ants to pieces. Lindor tells Will that Lena's family is a lineage of knights, and Lena is a rare mage who also specializes in close combat. Lena says the competition for points will be very annoying, and they must advance faster than any other team. We later learn that Professor Workin was sitting with Will and asked him if he knew what the most vital magic in the dungeon is, and whether it is offensive or defensive magic. He told him that neither is correct, and that the strongest magic is search magic. He explained that the ordinary spell determines the location of enemies and points of weakness, and it is indispensable for the desert they are crossing in the dungeon. It is the foundation of all basics. Back to the present, an ant monster appears behind Will, but it is quickly dealt with by Julius, who eliminates the monster and tells Will that he is blocking his way. Will says to himself that he can't sense hostility quickly enough, and the others are using search magic to cover a wider area than his senses can cover. At this rate, they will finish off all the monsters before he can even think of doing anything. Finally, Will manages to finish off a monster, but suddenly finds Lindor using his magic and gathering all the monsters around them. Lindor tells Will that he is more of a hindrance than he expected, and he hasn't even played his role as a shield. He looks at Lena and tells her that this means he must question her judgment of him. Lena says that for reconnaissance and precision, Will simply didn't have time to work as a shield, and that he will sow his real strength against enemies above level 5. Then she uses a spell, probably like an arrow, and tells Will that it's no problem if he is a burden now, and she is sure he is strong. Julius uses his wand and draws energy from the monsters. He tells them he told them before that a person who can't use search will be a hindrance to him. Will thinks to himself that mages use magic wands to absorb the magical traces emitted by the defeated monsters. The wands act as recorders, allowing the academy to know the number of targets a student has defeated. They then move, and Kat tells them they haven't finished collecting the spoil. But Lindor says it's useless and collecting spoils has no value. Will stands up and tells them he is ready to go. Will thinks to himself that without a means to absorb the magical traces, he must take the monster remains with him to earn his points. This topic discourages the rest of the team. We find Xian telling Will that since he joined them, he must be careful and try not to embarrass them. Will stops and Xian hits Will on the head, saying he knew it would be like this from the beginning, and he will keep trying to be useful to them at any moment. Will says to himself afterwards that this is what he's telling himself, but he doesn't see them when they are tearing through the monsters, taking pictures. He keeps saying he expected this, but despite all this, everyone here is so skilled that he can't find a chance to intervene. At this rate, he is nothing more than a mule pulling a cart. Lena realizes a day has passed since the start of the practical applications for all students and wants to take a short break soon. Xian asks her if she wants to take a break in a place like this, saying he isn't asking for a hotel or anything, but just wants to feel safe enough to relax. Windor tells them that if that's the case, he will use his fire magic. He indeed uses his magic and creates a fortress of fire around them. Kat is amazed and asks if this is illusion magic. Will says yes and puts his hand in the fire, telling her the fire itself is illusory, but the monsters will be wary when they see the fire and won't approach. After that, Lena asks Will to distribute the items she gave them earlier. Indeed, Will takes his bag and gives the food to Julius and Xian. When he goes to give it to Lindor, he tells him not to come closer and leaves the food near him. When Will is surprised, he tells him that the elves don't allow anyone to touch them unless they consider them serious, so he doesn't want to touch him by mistake. Kat gets upset and says they are all on the same team, so why is he saying such things? Lindor tells them that they are all mages, but he is an elf, and that's the issue in short. The only person he considers worthy in this team is Lena. Will reassures Kat and tells her he doesn't want to fight, there's no problem, and the elven cultures and customs differ from theirs. Will sits down looking sad. We learn from him that elves are like dwarves, carved from another world. They are magic users, and they are also a noble race, gifted, and consider themselves of greater value than anyone else. Their behavior is intolerable, but their talent surpasses most mages. One of the groups of the Magic Finder Queen of Hearts is dancing. Later, while they are sitting, Lena tells them she will review their next step. Their most important target is the Boreas because it's worth 110 points, and there is only one. Therefore, they must defeat the boss of the 10th floor. Kat exclaims that 110 points is the highest number of points in these practical applications. Xian says it is known and common that anyone who challenges it pays the price, and without a doubt, it is the final boss of the practical applications for all. Lena tells them that she formed this team originally with the goal of killing the Boreas, and they possess the skills enough to kill a monster worth 110 points. She will prove the towers D. Lindor says this ship has already sailed, and he doesn't intend to abandon it half. But she asks him if they will skip the appetizers and head straight for the main course. Lena tells him she wants to challenge it with their full strength and proper magical death, and they can eliminate the other monsters afterwards. If they have no objections, they took the furthest route to the 10th floor. Will says to himself that all he managed to achieve today is just 5 pathetic points, and that's not good. He will kill a floor boss. He would be lying if he said he wasn't scared of that, but he will go for Farah. In another place in the dungeon, we find a person hiding his face approaching another person without a head. He asks him what he is doing and calls him headless. He orders him to go and kill everyone in the upper floors. It appears that the headless one is killing Stu. He communicates with the second person by writing in the air. He tells him he is bored of this, so let them taste torment. The person hiding his face laughs. Then we return to Will and the others when they reach the 10th floor. Julius is surprised seeing the corpses of monsters spread everywhere and asks if another team did this. But Lindor tells him it's impossible because they took a shorter route and bypassed the base camps as well. It's impossible for any student to have preceded them. Kat asks what Will is doing because he is close to a monster. Will says there is no evidence of any magic here and these monsters were cut down by pure strength alone. Then Lena tells them that the room where Nabosley appears is there, lighting the way. Will notices that the dungeon is very quiet to the point that it seems fake. Suddenly they find a very large monster in front of them, but it's dead. They realize this monster is Nebris, the boss of the 10th floor. They are shocked. Lena requests that they all use their search magic. Windor says the magical trace of Nebris isn't completely drained. They are all tense and don't know who could have killed the floor boss. Will remembers when Professor Workin told him that search is a multi-purpose spell but not strong, and it's difficult to detect smart traps with it. Magic can be used to employ hiding skills to conceal themselves from it. There is also a type of monster that can avoid search magic. Back to the present, Will senses a monster above them. Indeed, he looks up and finds a huge monster preparing to unleash its power. Will warns all of them, but the monster unleashes its power on Will, who manages to block the force with his sword but can't hold on and is sent flying backward. Suddenly, the monster appears behind Lindor. Will warns him, but the monster manages to deliver a very strong blow to Lindor. The others prepare to cast their magic, but the monster strikes the ground, destroying it and causing them to fall below. Lindor is falling unconscious. They rush to his side to save him. The tremors reach the other students who are far from them. Rusty anticipates that Will is in trouble and is now with play. Will manages to reach Lindor and land with him on the ground without him getting hurt, but he notices the monster injured Lindor's arm. Will says this is lower than the 10th floor and they are even outside the academy's scope. Chai descends with Julius and tells him they are on the 1st floor, and he must have seen it with his own eyes because they fell toward the floor below. Julius is in disbelief and says the 111th floor is far from the tower's area, and only the refined mages are allowed to descend to this dangerous place. We find Lena bleeding and saying this is the throat of the nightmare. This vast area extends to the 15th floor. Its structure is complex and its monsters are very strong, on a completely different level from the other floors. Kat landed in the same place as Lena and runs to her when she finds her falling. But Lena tells her it's not dangerous, it's just a stone that hit her during the collapse. She notices that only she and Kat are here and says that separation on the 1st floor is very dangerous. If they don't regroup in the dungeon, it will devour them all while they are still alive. Even Will. We find Will standing before a very large serpent-like monster. We find Lindor unconscious, remembering certain people's words about him when he was young, that he should go to the Magic Academy, that he has no real skill in illusion magic. Eli Newer tells him they don't need him in their tribe and even cuts off his hand. Lindor wakes up and is surprised by the huge monster alone. When Will reaches out his hand to heal his arm, Lindor yells at him, telling him not to touch him, that he is an elf and it's not appropriate for him to be touched. He calls him talentless. Will tells him that even if it means Lindor will hate him for life and one day kill him, he still can't leave him like this. He asks him to let him heal his arm. But Lindor says he can use first aid healing on himself and asks for the medical supplies. Indeed, Lindor begins to treat him. We find Will saying that regardless of Lindor's medical supplies, they have lost almost all equipment. They only have 3 secondary weapons left, plus Rusty's magical tools, and each of them has their own food and drink. The same goes for Cat and the others. Therefore, they can only hold out for 2 days. But then he says no, given the circumstances of the 11th floor, they can only hold out for 1 day. Then he tells Lindor that he wants to prioritize finding Cat and the others. This means they will move through the dungeon. He asks if he can do. Lindor says that's the best thing to do when trapped in the dungeon and they should wait for rescue. Will says that if they don't act, they will die, and this is his view of the dungeon. Besides, the presence of these monsters on the 10th floor means the rescue operation will take a long time. Then we find Professor Worker speaking to Professor Eliza, asking what is happening. We find all the students around her running, terrified. This is happening on the 8th floor. She is killing monsters and says it's a stampede. A horde of monsters destroyed the... Then he asks about Bruno and the others. She tells him they were killed, and the one who killed them decapitated. They also don't know the situation from the 9th floor below, but she is confident they have fallen into the same chaos they are in here. Worker says there wasn't a monster stampede there, but even academy teachers were killed. This is definitely not a coincidence. He anticipates that all this was planned. Suddenly, Edward arrives and says the practical applications have been cancelled. These anomalous phenomena are endangering the students and they must intervene. Worker hears him and goes with him. We find Rusty heard them and was standing in the same place. We find Will walking behind Lindor. Will notices that Lindor uses search every now and then. He tells him he must stop using it because it's just a common spell, and if he overuses it, he will exhaust himself. But Lindor yells at Lindor tells him to shut up and asks what he would do if they were ambushed again. And they don't know what could happen here. He asks how he can be so calm in a dangerous place like this. Will tells him that search is effective within an area. It's not about using it gradually. It differs from area to area. They need to be at least 140 miles apart, and their steps are about 70 seeli. He will tell him when they have taken 200 steps, and then he wants him to use search again. Together they will sense different things. He wants to divide the work between them to benefit from all this. He also asks him to leave the enemies immediately beside them to him and Chi-Chi, and they will take care of any enemy that search doesn't detect. He asks him to focus on the distant enemies. Lindor asks him how he can be so calm under these circumstances. Will tells him that to get out of the tower ahead, he has no choice but to earn points by force. He has done a comprehensive search of the dungeon, tried everything he could, and has also been trapped in many different floors. He knows how to deal with this situation because of his experience with it. Lindor gets angry, but Chi-Chi alerts Will that something is coming. Will looks and finds large pigs named Jurgessa, worth 10 points, surrounding them. Will senses that there are many of them in different passages. The fight begins. Lindor finds Will diving into the midst of the monsters with his sword. He is surprised and asks himself how he can move like that, how he is able to fight at all in this situation. He has turned knowledge into wisdom and the unknown into the... He asks himself if Will has become this strong. Suddenly he finds a monster coming at him. Since he won't have time for a counterattack, he creates an illusion of fire in front of him. But Will yells at him and tells him it won't work with these monsters. Indeed, he finds the monster passing through the fire and charging at Lindor, who screams. But Will makes it in time, throws his sword at the monster, runs at high speed, and finishes it off with flair. He asks Lindor if he is okay. He tells him that Jurgessa have no eyes, so their sense of smell is very developed, and illusions don't affect them. Suddenly, Lindor laughs and says this is very funny. Will tells him to forget it, that he is a very talented elf, and next time they will make a plan. Lindor tells him he is mistaken and didn't understand his meaning. He says about himself that he is not talented, that he is from the dregs, a dull person. We see Lindor remembering when he was training somewhere with all his might, using all his magic, then getting very tired, and his magic began to fade. He said it wasn't enough to reach their goal, but he said he wouldn't stop and didn't want to give up. He kept calling for Elner and continued his training. Back to the present in the Demas, Elner says to himself that he is from the residue, a person who remains and there's no one else. He is the only one left in the academy after 6 years. All the others, without exception, went to the tower. All his relatives insulted him in every way with words, and the reason is his illusion magic, which is meant to give illusions a physical form, like at the Magic Festival. It produces non-material illusions, all just for show without substance, and you can't defeat an enemy with it. Will says to him, but you are one of the top 3 in our year, and everyone says you are talented. Elner says you must have heard about Lena, who is also still in the Academy remnants, and that they are the underdogs. Will is surprised by the term underdog. We see Lena walking with Colt and telling her that whether someone is discovered at the magic festival or spontaneously creates a new spell, those who prove themselves go to the tower regardless of their graduation grade. She says that in the past 6 years, she saw the talented ones. She says about herself and the others that they are people nobody wants. Colt tells her that people call her the ideal miss, which is proof that she is. But Lena tells her that's only within the academy, and they are nothing more than insignificant frogs who know nothing about the great oceans. She says she saw it with her own eyes. There was a first-year student like her who nevertheless ascended to become a G-offender and was very brilliant and knowledgeable. Colt realizes here that Lena is talking about Wyfuria. Lena continues, saying that since then she has been a part of her, feeling what it's like to be weak and unable to dream of being real talent. We also find Windor telling Will that he was the first person who taught him about his flaws and made him feel his shortcomings. He had a half-sister he grew up with in his homeland. Will asks about this half-sister. Windor says she is the pride of their people in their lofty kingdom. Here Will guesses that she is the elf Elner. Windor says that he and Elner grew up together and he has deep feelings for her. She was very young and he thought he would always be by her side to support her. He remembers being with her when she used her magic. He tells Will that Elner's magic is very refined and strong enough to create the king's forest, and she became a Maj-Offender. He, to reach her, continued to exert effort and trained himself, but he was still just a blunt one. He despised the desert to hide his weakness and incompetence. He says about himself that he is a disgrace to the forehead of the elves. Suddenly, Elner finds Will smiling and telling him that he always felt they had something in common. Windor is surprised and asks what he's talking about, telling him not to try to console him. He says he is nothing more than an obstacle in front of him and asks Will to leave him there. Will tells him that he is just confirming that he doesn't want to do that and that he shouldn't feel down because he is an amazing guy and he is sure of what he's saying. Will says he will protect him until he can stand up again. We see Colt telling Lena that she knows they all feel inadequate because it concerns the tower, but she knows a boy who is still struggling even if they mocked him and he was far from talent. Here, Lena realizes she is talking about Will. Colt tells her that if he heard how they were beating themselves up like this, she's sure he would laugh. After that, Will defeats a nightmare eye monster worth 7 points, and Windor is helping him while standing far away. He says everything they faced were enemies above 5 points, and he notes that Will managed to defeat them in the blink of an eye, not to mention the consecutive battles one after another. Will finishes off the last monster with all grandeur and goes to Windor, who is asking himself how much endurance he has left. Then Will asks if he is okay. Windor asks him why he didn't just leave him like the others. Will says because he is completely confident that he is not a bad person. Then Will and Chi-Chi feel something, so Windor uses his search magic, but he tells Will that the search magic isn't showing anything. But it seems clear to Will that he knows what it is. He tells him that the Demas spawns monsters. Then they see lights passing by them, and suddenly a monster appears above them, its substance like water, turning it into a river beneath them. They also notice the presence of a fiery creature, so it sprays fire at them, and its magic explodes. Windor says these are Tyros Nefaldi. He asks Windor what type of monsters these are. Will tells him they are a Bakar type, a very special type on this floor. Monsters with such a bad reputation are worth 11 points. Physical attacks don't affect their fiery bodies, and they are highly resistant to magic. Windor says that makes them a natural enemy for mages, and surely the tower also considers them very dangerous. Will says the only thing that can kill them is the elven illusion magic. He also says that behind them is a dead end and there's no solution before them except to fight. He can't kill them alone and asks Windor to lend him his strength. But Windor gets nervous and says he can't because he told him his illusion magic is lacking. Windor cries and says if he interferes he will mess things up. Will tells him it's okay if he does that, and it's normal if they make mistakes. They aren't geniuses, so if they don't make mistakes, they won't progress. Windor tells him that if he fails, Will might die. But Will says he won't die, and in the end they both share the same dream. He is going to the tower because Wyfuria is waiting for him, so he won't die until he goes. He asks him to trust his words. Windor says to himself that they have the same dream but are very different. Then Will starts attacking the fiery monsters with his sword but finds it doesn't affect them. Windor also notices this and says he has to help him. He gets up and uses his magic but finds his magic isn't working either. He says this was his mistake and he will cause Will's death. Suddenly the fiery monsters attack Will with fire, but Chi-Chi comes and uses magic like a fan, blocking the fire. Will calls out to Windor and encourages him, telling him not to give up, and all the effort he has made until now wasn't for nothing, and he believes in him. Windor takes advantage of the fact that Will believes in him, even though his own people abandon him. He remains, it's the only thing he must never abandon. He remembers Elner too and then he moves. He tells Will he will never abandon. He uses his magic and tree root sprout hitting the fiery monsters. He manages to use his illusion magic to its full strength. Will is amazed and tells him he managed to do it. But then Elner asks him to forgive him for his previous attitude towards him. He calls him a warrior who deserves respect. Will says he wouldn't have said anything before, but now he will say it. He tells him that he has always respected him too. He extends his hand, and Windor gets up and shakes it. Then we see him holding a knife, cutting himself and letting blood drip onto a map. Windor asks him what he's doing. Will tells him it's one of Rusty's magical tools, the researcher's map. Through the user's blood, it automatically creates a shape. Windor says, so you weren't walking randomly like I thought. Will says, yes, and that Chi-Chi also smelled Colt and Qian. We see Chi-Chi pointing the way for them and Will hopes everyone is okay. Then we find the always angry duo, Julius and Qian, walking together. Julius asks him if he has water. Un says that's a precious resource and shouldn't be consumed carelessly. If he really wants to drink, why doesn't he just use his ice? A logical idea, frankly, but Julius gets annoyed and shouts, saying he knows he can't do that, and they can't waste their magic either. He had been using his search magic intermittently. Shin starts shouting, saying that as long as he has the strength to scream, he can make a cup of water. Julius hits the wall in frustration, talks about Shun's power, and they also argue. After that, we find Julius saying to himself that Shin is arrogant, but only because his magic skills are improving. They weren't compatible from the start, but for the two of them to be insulted by a talentless person is unacceptable. Julius uses his search magic, but suddenly Shin feels something strange and tells him there are enemies. Julius says he already used search magic and there was no trace of monsters. Shin tells him they experienced this before on the 10th floor too, and demons can evade search. And indeed, suddenly they find evil guard monsters appearing. Shin knows them and tells Julius they are called Mouth of Nightmare. But for these evil guard monsters to appear like this is from mass spawning. Shin thinks this was created by the monsters they saw on the 10th floor. Julius keeps making copies of himself, even if he can't control them well, and they are supposed to play their role anyway. But Julius gets tense and says they don't stand a chance against this number of monsters and they must escape. But Qian appears and says that's the monster's mistake. Because of it, this is the biggest and most miserable humiliation in his life. Qian's intention is to save Will. Sean struggles and starts using his guardian eagle magic. We find the evil guard monsters also appearing near the other students who are fleeing. A student falls and is about to die, but we see Teacher Edward using his magic, cutting through the monsters and transporting them. He orders all students to evacuate to the 6th floor immediately and asks the guards and teachers to lead them there. We see Teacher Worker coming, riding a flying monster, taking Edward with him and moving quickly. The students are amazed. Edward asks Worker about the other students. Worker says most of them escaped, and fortunately most of them didn't go past the 8th floor, but only one team did that, which is Lena's team. He also says their information is correct. They are on their way to the floor guardian. Edward tells him the 10th floor is vast, and with a limited number of teachers, searching for him would be nearly impossible. Worker tells him he knows where they are because Chi-Chi, who is Will's tool, is a Karnak, and Chi-Chi's crystal and the crystal he has are connected. He knows that Will and the others are on the 11th floor. We go to Colt, who is throwing small stones that glow behind them. Lena calls out to her, so she smiles and walks away. It's shown that she is throwing them. Then Colt asks Elena how much time has passed. She tells her it's been 16 hours since they fell to the 11th floor. Their food and water have run out, and whenever they try to rest, the monsters don't leave them alone. Colt says thanks to Lena, they managed to survive the attack, but she is starting to feel tired. We see Lena stopping and Colt scolds her because she allowed her ambitions to surpass her, and because of her they are all in trouble. She blames herself for everything that happened, but Colt tells her that's not right, and the reason for all this is the monster on the 10th floor. Anyone can figure that out without thinking. She also tells her that if she wants to talk that way, then she got what she deserved because she accompanied her without even an invitation. Then Lena smiles and thanks her. They continue on their way. Colt says to herself that she is sure Will come to save them. Then we find Windor and Will running. Windor tells Will he senses a mage around the corner. As soon as they pass the corner, they find Shuln burning the evil guard monsters. Windor is surprised by the large amount of magic residue and says it's unbelievable that he wiped out all of them alone. Suddenly, Julius appears from behind an ice wall and says he wasn't alone, that the two of them are here. Julius is tired, injured, and in a bad state. He says although Shan's fire was violent, his use of many copies of himself and sacrificing them. A wound passes by his side. Will says to him, "You're alive," and calls him Banny the Blunt. Julius says, "Yeah," and that he's also happy to see him well. Will asks them if Lena and Colt are with them because it's only the two of them. Will tells him that as long as they are also alone, then surely Colt and Lena are still by themselves. Then Colt and Lena see Teacher Bruno. Colt is about to go to him, but Lena stops her and tells her something isn't normal. Suddenly they see Teacher Bruno's head fall from beside him, and he is holding another head. We realize this is the person who is speaking on the air and writing greetings for them in the air, as if saying hello. But the person with the covered face appears and says there's no need for greetings. He calls him stupid and asks how these two came down here while he left the matter to him on the upper floor. Colt is shocked seeing this man holding Teacher Bruno's head and another. He says to the covered one that obviously Duke failed to eliminate them and they must have dug a hole in the ground and fell. The person with the covered face says he shouldn't have acted like that. It wasn't his problem. He was sitting around having fun and playing, and because of that his secret was exposed. The headless one tells him not to get angry. He calls him by the name Mars. Colt is very shocked and asks what this thing is. Are these really their teacher's heads? She asks if they are the two who killed them, and who they are exactly. Suddenly the headless one crushes the teacher's head he has and tells him they are just ordinary villains who want to destroy the Maja Fender barrier. But Lena and Colt know that if this barrier falls, disaster will come. Quite simply, the headless one tells them that since the two of them are here, he can give them two heads later. He attacks them with all the force of his sword through the air. But at the last moment, Will comes blocking the strike with all grandeur and confidence. They find Xianwendor and Julius are with them too. They ask how they found them. Will tells them the reason is Chi-Chi's nose and the stones that she was leaving behind. They found them and followed them. Then Qian asks who these two people are and they are surprised by the headless one. Then this person draws a scary emoji for them and attacks them. Will blocks the strike, affects his friends. They save him with their magic. The headless one laughs and says they are cool and wants to put their heads in place of his collectible. But Mars pulls him and says to stop playing because an annoying group is approaching them, and they need to go and reap the rewards. The headless one says a loss like this is difficult and asks someone named Duke to finish them all off. Suddenly, magical gates appear above them. Lena says this is the instant, rapid teleportation magic specific to the Magic Kingdom. They are all very surprised. Windor says this is the monster that appeared on the 10th floor. Will says its value is 207 points. This monster descends from the gates. They know this is the villain Duke, who appears to be huge and very strong. Then we learn about the 1 in 1,000 rule from Will, which is the tower's standard for determining points. A monster with 1 point is equivalent to a sorcerer with 1,000 points. Will says the monster in front of them is 270 points, transformed for a sorcerer to possess. A 270-point monster is equivalent to a sorcerer with 270,000 points. The evil, formidable monster Duke appears and we see Duke preparing to launch a radial force from its mouth. Will warns his friends and Duke unleashes its tremendous power. They try to dodge with difficulty. Julius is shocked by this power. Will tells Liana they need to retreat, that they can still get out alive. Indeed, they all run. Lindor stops in front of Duke and tells them to go ahead, creating a large wall in front of. Will shouts for Lindor and suddenly finds Duke destroying the wall easily and preparing to launch its power again. Lindor is shocked by Duke's ability to destroy illusion magic. Duke directs its power at Lindor, but Will quickly arrives, teleports him, and they run fast. Duke fires again, but they barely dodge it and manage to escape. Everyone is shocked, saying this is impossible, asking what this monster exactly. Will tells them he read something like this in the Academy library and learned it's the evil Duke, which appears on the 25th floor, close to the peak of the evil monster faction. Julius asks what a monster like this is doing here. Liana says it must be related to the sorcerer who summoned the gate. Then we see Will observing the situation from their hiding spot. They find the monsters searching for them. Xion comes and asks if they can escape completely, but Will says no, the monsters are still searching. Julius asks how many evil guards and sentinels are. Will tells them Duke has taken control of them all and ordered them to find him. Vian says the large gathering of sentinels on the 11th floor must be because of this monster. Then Julius loses his temper and asks Will if he's implying there's no escape, that they'll be trapped on this floor and all die. We see Liana saying to herself that they are exhausted, beaten in the darkest circumstances, and despair is trying to choke them, thinking about what they can do. Suddenly, Will tells them the only solution is to take down Duke. He explains that when a ruler of Baron rank or higher is present among the evil monsters, their escape range is blocked across several floors. But if they defeat the ruler, they lose their leader, which will clear their chieftain has instantly transferred to this floor via the gate. If they can break their chain of command, it will be easier for rescue to arrive from the academy. Will agree. But then Julius gets angry, shouts at Will, calling him talentless, and asks if he really thinks they can defeat this thing alone. But Will says he has a plan, though he won't force help on them since he can't use magic anyway. Julius tells him of course not, and that no one will applaud a plan he made. But he is surprised to say he trusts Will, that his wisdom and self-sacrifice have saved him many times, so he trusts his abilities. Colt also says she trusts Will, that he's an expert on the dungeon more than anyone else. Even Delave and Tian says since escaping will only lead to being chased and surrounded, They must face this threat instead, even if it doesn't align with what this blockhead is saying. Will is surprised. We find Lindor telling Liana that he allowed Will to touch him, and he wishes she would trust the friend of 1,000. Liana smiles and says she was wrong from the start. She shouldn't have made Will their shield, he should have been their leader. Right now, he's the only one not succumbing to despair, and she trusts Lindor, and since he trusts him, she entrusts everything to him too, asking him to give them orders and they will comply. Will tells them they will return safely. Julius says they've all lost their minds, that they can't win by following a talentless guy's plan. Suddenly, Will tells Julius he's right, they can't win with his plan alone, that he, Julius, is the key, and asks him to lend them his strength. He exploits something about Julius, and Will says he will perform a special secret magic trick from Farah. Then we cut to Duke flying, and suddenly finds Will and the others standing before him. He attacks them and they dodge his strikes. Suddenly Julius uses his magic, but Duke stops it. But we discover it's a copy of Julius. Duke looks around and finds many copies of Julius using magic. We learn that when Julius was surprised by Will's talk of a magic trick, Will told him it's the Ars Ice special enchantment from Feria, which makes the incantation persist. Normally, if the enchantment is disrupted, he can't cast it, but this trick allows it to continue from where it stopped. If one copy is destroyed and stops, another copy can continue the incantation, allowing him to cast an advanced, long-lasting enchantment. We see Duke destroying the copies, but Julius doesn't stop the incantation. Will is hiding and tells the others they must provide cover for Julius, that low-level enchantments of that level will suffice, and they must keep firing to slow the monster. Indeed, we see Colt, Winter, and Shy using their magic on Duke, but find it has no effect. Suddenly, Will jumps and slashes Duke from above with his sword. Duke flings him away. Will says if what he read in the library is correct, then Duke's wings are impervious, meaning all his and Shore's and the others' attacks can't penetrate them. He says they must act as decoys and keep baiting Duke until Julius starts the bombardment. Lindor uses wind magic and teleports Will before he falls. Julius continues casting his magic and uses his new attack, Full Sham. Unfortunately, Duke is completely unaffected. They all stand shocked by Duke's defense against this attack. We learn Will was standing next to Liana, saying the obstacle is facing a 270-point monster, and that they might be able to withstand Julius's strongest attack. He looks at Liana and they think of something together. Indeed, at that moment, Liana appears with her magic dashing towards Duke. Will says even if Duke blocks Julius, the ice effect will slow its wings. Combined with Liana's super speed, she can slip into the effective melee range. But as soon as Liana reaches Duke and attacks him, a barrier stops her. She stops and asks if it's a remote control circle that automatically activated a barrier on the monster, saying the sorcerers must have cast this enchantment on Duke. Duke prepares its power to shoot at Liana, but Will quickly takes her and runs. Duke's power chases them until Chi-Chi creates a barrier over Will and Liana and teleports. But a beam breaks Will's glasses, the ones Faraya gave him. Will is shocked seeing the glasses fall before. At that time, Warren, who is piloting the flying beast with Edward behind him, sees what's happening to Will through the crystal connected to Chi-Chi. Warren is shocked and asks what could make the monster Duke exist there, but Edward says there's no time to think and asks him to increase. Then we see Winter saving Will and Liana before they fall, going to check on them. Winter asks Liana if she's okay, and she says yes, that will protect her. Colt is worried about Will, who is shocked, staring at the glasses, speechless. They find Duke breaking through the grid in front of it to reach them. Suddenly, Liana asks them to take Will and all escape. She will buy them time, even if it costs her life. Colt says that can't happen, but Liana says she's the one who failed in her attack and she must do this now. Colt refuses, but Liana stands and asks if they know why her family always dies young. She says it's because they are like knights, becoming shields for their allies. Suddenly Lindor stands beside her. He says he will stay with her. Liana asks why he's doing it. He says that finally beside her he can find a second reason to respect. He looks at Will. Then the two of them charge. Julius asks Cian what will do. We see Liana and Lindor attacking Duke with all their might. Lindor manages to bind him with his magic, but before Liana can strike, Duke breaks free and knocks them both down. We see Shan standing shocked, saying all they can do is run, that Lindor and Liana will die, and to ensure their deaths aren't in vain, they must escape this place, there's no shame. But suddenly Will asks Yan to him to stop his shaking, because his glasses from Faraya are broken and he can't do anything without them. He cries, saying he's so scared he's paralyzed. But suddenly Xian gets angry, grabs him by his clothes, and says that's impossible because he's the one who started all this, gave them all hope. He throws him to the ground and says Liana and Dor will die now, and he says he's scared and must take responsibility for what he did. Shin punches Will in the face, saying he's responsible for bringing them down here. Jin keeps hitting Will until he bleeds. Colt tries to stop him, but suddenly Will grabs Xian's hand, thanks him, and smiles, saying he's no longer shaking. He gets up, grabs his sword, and asks everyone to take care of Chi-Chi. He heads towards Duke with confidence. Xian is surprised seeing Will is no longer afraid like before, but Colt says he is scared now, that he's always like this, always terrified. Colt cries. Xian asks her what she's talking about, how he's supposed to believe. Colt says that with a magic wand, one can cast spells from a distance, but it's completely different with a sword. He has to fight opponents much larger and stronger face-to-face by himself. She asks if he can imagine how terrifying that is. We see Will fighting, dodging Duke's attacks. Colt tells Xian that Will is weak, but no matter how scared he is, no matter how pitiful he looks, the thing he fears most is running away. He's just a normal coward, but all of this is considered bravery. We see Colt also stepping forward, saying she will fight. Xian is surprised, shocked, and upset. Will fights with all his might, saying the monster's defense is invincible, its movements very agile for its size. He can barely hit it, but knows it's all in its protective wings. If they want to defeat it, they must cut its wings. Suddenly, Will sees Colt's magic being cast on Duke. He looks and sees her fighting with them. Will says Liana and the others can no longer fight, so he and Colt need to find a way to help them quickly. Will keeps dodging and parrying Duke's attacks as he gets closer, saying he's scared that Duke destroyed his glasses. He's terrified to the point he can't think straight. But the thought of losing someone makes him even more afraid. Then he shouts for Colt, and she understands what he wants. Duke attacks with its beam. Will says Chi-Chi isn't with him, so a direct hit means instant death. He must kill it with one strike. He also says he's seen this attack before. The moment Duke's beam reaches Will, dust covers the area around him. When the dust settles, only Will's sword is there. Lindor and Liana are confused, but they find Will above, and Colt uses her magic, creating a magical cushion under Will. Will lands and runs across it, uses Colt's magic, and has a stronger sword. We see Duke starting to unleash its power on a larger scale. Suddenly, Xian's Fire Guardian flies above Duke with Xian on top, and they charge. Duke fires at him but misses the second time. Duke manages to hit him. We see Xian falling from above alone. Will realizes Xian was using his guardian as a shield. Sin lands and tells Will there's nothing he can do, and either sisses strong flames on Duke, but unfortunately, it's still not enough to defeat Duke, who flings Xian away and isn't affected by the flames at all. Liana says that was an advanced close-range enchantment and it still didn't work. Xian is surprised, saying the wand isn't enough to defeat it. Will says the sword won't kill it either. Suddenly, a long crystal descends in front of. We see Rusty standing above, shouting to Will that he must remember it's a magic wand and a sword. Will remembers Faria. Suddenly, we see him in Will's memories, a woman holding a small child with someone in front of her. She tells him she's made her decision, and for the protection of this world, one day the magic wand and the sword will meet and join together. We see Duke approaching Will, who is staring at this crystal, muttering magic wand and sword. Suddenly, he runs towards his sword, shouts for Xian, and says magic wand and sword. Will grabs his sword and Xian shoots his flames at him. Will uses them. Warren and Edward see what's happening and can't believe it. Will's sword absorbs Xian's flame. Everyone is surprised by what's happening. Will stands with a flaming sword like a lion. God forbid any envy. Duke fires its beam at him again. Will says his field of vision turned red. Power accumulated inside him. He felt a surge of power flowing through him, stimulating him. Quickly he found himself granting its name, Ignis Weiss. We see Will destroying Duke's power and descending on Duke with all his might, slicing it literally in half in a very magnificent way. The ultimate greatness. And that's it, my friend. Our tale ends here for now. What will happen after Will defeats Duke? That's what we'll find out in the next episode, my friend. I hope you liked the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.